Welcome to a special edition of the Glenn Beck program. I like to call it our Egghead Hour. We have gathered some of the best historians we could find to help America understand the progressive movement and how this presidential administration, at least this is my theory, is using Woodrow Wilson and FDR as a playbook, as a blueprint. I know, you could hardly control your excitement, but you don't want to miss a second of this if you want to understand what's really happening in America. Come on, let's go. Hello, America. Hope and change. Well, it was a movement that surged Barack Obama into the White House. But it is not the first time America has seen this sort of political uprising of hope and change and progress. There was hope and change way back in the early 20th century, but the name was different. It was progressivism. Have you heard that before? Are you a progressive? It was the shiny new car. Well, now, wait a minute. What happened? Well, you see, back in the early 20th century, everybody wanted to take it for a spin. Progressivism had no political boundaries. The Democrats, like Woodrow Wilson, loved it. Republicans, Teddy Roosevelt, loved it. America was stuck in a rut. We needed to make progress. How better to break free than to use progressive tactics? Well, the message resonated with so many Americans, and progressives began winning elections. And then they started to govern. That's where the problem came in. In the response to the repeated bank runs in the early 1900s, progressives came up with an idea: the Federal Reserve System. This flew right in the face of our founders. Thomas Jefferson, he argued that the central bank was, quoting, one of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution, end quote. Well, it hadn't taken long to prove Jefferson right, as the worst financial disaster in the U.S. happened largely because of the Fed's continual contraction of the money supply before and during the Great Depression. Didn't work out so well, did it? Progressives also wanted to redistribute the wealth, spread it around a bit. They implemented an income tax. In fact, the name is still a progressive income tax. You see, how did they possibly sell it to the American people? It was easy. They sold it at something, it was just going to lower tariffs. It would only be a tax on the wealthy. That's it. The regular people would never see it. Woodrow Wilson, the progressive Democrat, led passage of the Revenue Act in 1913. Well, the rates that the progressives promised only lasted 4 years. Then all Americans had their taxes jacked up, and they haven't come down since. The bottom tax bracket hasn't paid single-digit percentages in taxes in over 60 years. How's that progress? They first introduced also the first real nanny state effort. What are they doing now? Now they're talking about, hey, we got a nanny state. Hey, don't eat that. You don't want to drink too much of that. Make sure your kid has an apple, right? Well, in 1919, the progressives did the same thing. It was called prohibition, and they convinced the nation to ban drink because they knew better than the people buying booze. Well, what was the final straw on this before they had to go undercover? I think it was the President of Peace. Woodrow Wilson ran for re-election, and he just barely won. And he said, we're never going to go to war in Europe. Lo and behold, just a few months later, World War I. But the progressives billed it as the war to end all wars because progressives thought they had the solution to world conflict. And they brought us the League of Nations, another failure. It led to the United Nations. Well, back by 1920, Americans really had enough, and the progressives knew it, and so they had to go underground. But they never left us. They never changed tactics. They thought, well, just evolve America. They are patient. They have a plan. And while this country has been asleep, we have been co-opted. There are now more than 80 members of the Progressive Caucus. Of the 20 standing committees in the House, 11, over half, are chaired by members of the Progressive Caucus. You want to know why things don't make sense in Washington? This is it. Oh, and of course, there's the Democratic president. Really? If you think he's a Democrat, think again.
To my progressive friends, I would remind you that for decades, the driving idea behind reform has been to end insurance company abuses and make coverage available for those without it. The public option is only a means to that end. And we should remain open to other ideas that accomplish our ultimate goal. And to my Republican friends, I say that rather than making wild claims about a government takeover of health care, we should work together to address any legitimate concerns you may have.
Did you see that? Just in case you're still not convinced.
You will carry on the best progressive, forward-looking values of this proud Commonwealth. Change has always come from places like Wisconsin, the state where the progressive movement was born.
Okay.
Where better to affirm our ideals than here in Wisconsin, where a century ago the progressive movement was born.
All right, so there he is, talking about progressive. And did you notice what was missing when he was talking to the Congress? My progressive friends and my Republican friends. Where are the Democrats? For 100 years, progressives have been using both parties as a host, and they have been feeding on this republic. Tonight, we examine the game plan. Who started it? What does it mean? What is a progressive? What is the difference between progressives, Republicans, Democrats? Is there any coexisting with the progressives if you believe in the original intent of the founders? And what's coming next? What is the best way to fight them? We go now to our panel of eggheads. R.J. Prestrito in Dallas. He is the author of Woodrow Wilson and the Roots of Modern Liberalism and American Progressivism. Burton Folsom Jr., he's the author of New Deal, Raw Deal, and Larry Schweikart. He is the author of A Patriot's History of the United States. All right. Where do I even begin? Who wants to give me, RJ, let me start with you, because your book really opened my eyes, on Woodrow Wilson. So let me go to you. Give me a definition of what a progressive really is.
Well, Glenn, to me, progressivism is all about moving beyond the Constitution, getting beyond the bedrock principles of the American founding. The progressives detested the political ideas behind the Declaration of Independence because they enshrined the idea of individual God-given rights as the end of government. They detested the Constitution because the Constitution put limits on the national government, which were designed to uphold those rights. And as you said in your introduction, the progressive dream was one of unlimited national government. Redistribution of wealth was part of that plan. And the progressives knew that the political principles of our founders stood in their way. So progressivism, in a nutshell, is to progress or to move beyond the Constitution.
You guys both agree with that here?
It is. I think it's even more in that there's an assumption about human nature that's built into progressivism.
Okay, let's get into that in a second, because I know where you're going, and I can't wait to open that can of worms. But let me go here. Most people, when you say the kinds of things, when I started learning about progressivism,
right,
really learning about it, I thought, well, now wait a minute, this is Marxism. But they separate, and help me out, if I would define the difference in their heads, it's the difference of revolution of Marxism and evolution of progressivism. Agree?
I think Marxism has an inherent mechanistic quality. This is going to happen regardless of who's in there making it happen. The progressives believe that individuals have a role in making this happen, and they're going to bring it about. So Woodrow Wilson is going to bring about this change.
Okay.
Glenn,
Go ahead.
I like to think of the progressives as conservative socialists. The same aims, the same understanding of the role of the state, no boundary that individual rights can place between the state and the individual, but the change they want it to take place, as you said, more gradually, more organically. So okay, conservative socialist is not a bad way to think of it.
All right, and this is because I want to make sure, because most Americans don't really have a handle on what the progressive movement is. And this is not about the Democrats. This is about the Democrats and the Republicans, right?
Sure. I mean,